The evening was quiet, almost too quiet for the part of the city he had chosen to walk through. The streets were lined with small shops that were just closing, their neon signs flickering as if they were struggling to stay awake. The smell of fried food mixed with the faint aroma of rain that had fallen earlier in the day. He walked slowly, letting his thoughts drift, thinking about nothing in particular. The day had been long, full of repetitive tasks and small frustrations, and he needed a drink. Something simple. Something ordinary. He turned the corner and spotted a small bar tucked between a closed bookstore and a laundromat. The sign outside was faded, the letters barely readable, but there was a warm light spilling out from the doorway. It felt inviting in a quiet, unassuming way. He pushed the door open, and the soft chime of a bell announced his arrival. The smell of wood polish, old leather, and a faint hint of alcohol hit him immediately, and he let out a small, relieved sigh. This was exactly what he needed. The bar was not busy. A few regulars sat at the counter, nursing their drinks and staring into the bottles as if looking for answers. A couple of people sat at a table in the corner, speaking quietly in low tones. He found himself a spot at the bar and sat down, letting the smooth leather stool sink slightly beneath him. A bartender, an older man with graying hair and a calm expression, came over and set a glass of water in front of him. "What'll it be?" The bartender asked. "Something strong," he replied, "to help me forget the day." The bartender nodded knowingly, and soon a glass of amber liquid was placed in front of him. He took a sip and felt the warmth spread through his chest. The world outside seemed to fade a little, replaced by the quiet hum of conversation, the occasional clink of glasses, and the soft music playing somewhere behind the shelves of bottles. It was peaceful in a way he hadn't realized he had been craving. As he was settling in, he noticed her. She was sitting a few seats down, alone, and yet impossible to ignore. At first glance, she looked like a woman, tall, strong, and elegant, but there was something about her that was different. Her eyes caught his attention first, sharp and bright, reflecting the dim light of the bar in a way that felt almost unnatural. They were golden, not a shade he had ever seen on anyone before. Her skin was smooth, but it had a subtle shimmer, as if dusted with tiny specks of light. And then there were her hands, long, graceful, but tipped with nails that were sharper and longer than human nails should be. He thought maybe she was wearing some kind of costume, maybe for a party or a performance. That had to be it. Otherwise, how could anyone look like that? After a moment of hesitation, he decided to do something completely ordinary. He signaled the bartender for another drink, then turned slightly toward her. "Can I get this to go with her?" he asked, pointing at the drink he had just ordered. The dragon, because by now he could see that was what she resembled. Her form slightly larger than a human, the faint curve of scales along her shoulders looked at him. Her gaze was calm, assessing, but there was a flicker of amusement in her eyes. She nodded once. He walked over and set the drink in front of her. "Here," he said, trying to sound casual, though his voice was a little shaky. I thought you might like this." She tilted her head slightly, the motion almost feline, and then smiled. It was a small, knowing smile, polite, but with an edge of curiosity. "Thank you," she said in a voice that was soft but carried a tone of command without trying. He felt a strange mixture of relief and awkwardness. He had no idea what had compelled him to do this. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the sense that she seemed lonely. Or maybe it was just a random act of kindness. Either way, he had done it. She took the glass and sipped slowly, deliberately. The golden glow of her eyes never left him. It made him feel exposed, as if she could see through every thought, every secret, every hesitation he had buried inside himself. He shifted in his seat, suddenly aware of how ordinary he felt compared to her. "So," he said, trying to make conversation, "do you come here often?" The words sounded awkward even as they left his mouth. She laughed softly, a sound that was melodic and somehow comforting. "Not often," she replied. "I prefer quiet places. People are easier to observe when they don't notice you." He frowned, unsure what she meant, but nodded anyway. "Yeah, quiet is good. I come here a lot after work. Helps me unwind." She nodded, placing her glass down. "It is important to unwind, to watch, to learn. Even the smallest details can be enlightening." He raised an eyebrow. "Learning? From people?" Her smile grew a little sharper, but she didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked around the bar, taking in the regulars, the bartender, and even him, with an intensity that made him feel small, but also interesting. "You notice things humans often overlook," she said finally. "How they move, the way they speak, the pauses they take. All of it tells a story, even if they do not realize it." He blinked, unsure whether she was joking or serious. But before he could ask, she picked up her glass again and took another slow sip. The conversation between them remained light, but every word she spoke carried a subtle weight, a suggestion that she was thinking about more than just the casual chatter. He found himself wanting to know more about her, yet afraid to ask too much. There was an energy about her, a presence that was both mesmerizing and intimidating. Time passed quickly. The bar, once full of the low hum of other patrons, seemed to shrink around them, as if the room existed only for the two of them. He told her about his day, the mundane struggles at work, the small victories and losses that made up his life. She listened attentively, nodding at the right moments, asking questions that showed she truly wanted to understand. He felt a strange comfort in talking to her. She didn't judge, didn't offer unwanted advice, and yet somehow made him feel seen. That was rare. He realized he could talk to her about things he wouldn't tell anyone else, and that thought was both exciting and frightening. By the time he glanced at the clock on the wall, hours had passed. The bar was quieter now, the few remaining patrons yawning or quietly sipping their drinks. He realized he had completely forgotten about time. "You should get some rest," she said suddenly, her voice gentle now. "Long days can weigh heavily if not balanced with calm." He laughed nervously. "Yeah, you're right. I should probably head out." She nodded, picking up her glass. "It was interesting speaking with you. I do not often encounter humans who are thoughtful." He smiled, feeling warmth spread through him at the compliment. "I guess I'm just lucky tonight." She looked at him for a long moment, and then, as if deciding something, gave a small, polite bow of her head. "Perhaps. Luck and choice are often intertwined." He nodded, still unsure what she meant, but feeling a sense of connection that was difficult to describe. He stood, leaving some coins on the bar, and pushed open the door to step back into the night. The streets were dark and quiet again, but something about the world felt different now. Brighter, maybe. Fuller. As he walked home, he couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way she had looked at him, the way she had listened, the way she had spoken. Something about her was beyond anything he had ever experienced. A strange mixture of power, wisdom, and kindness. He didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter, a simple act of buying a drink, would change everything. The world he had always known, ordinary and predictable, was about to become something much bigger. Something extraordinary. For now, though, he simply walked home under the streetlights, feeling the cool air on his face and replaying every moment of the evening in his mind. And somewhere, just beyond the stars, she was watching too, thinking the same thing. He couldn't stop thinking about her. The memory of her golden eyes, the way her scales shimmered faintly, even under the dim bar light, and the calm, Commanding tone she used when she spoke made it impossible to focus on anything else. That night, as he lay in bed, he found himself replaying their conversation, word by word, gesture by gesture. How could someone be so different and yet feel so real? So human in some ways? It was unsettling and fascinating all at once. The next day at work, everything felt dull. He went through the motions, answering emails, making calls, and attending meetings, but his mind kept drifting back to the bar, to her. He wondered if he would ever see her again. Maybe it had just been a one-time encounter, a fleeting, strange moment in an ordinary life. But part of him hoped not. That evening, he found himself walking toward the same bar, almost without thinking. It was a quiet instinct, a pull he didn't fully understand. The neon sign above the door was flickering again, but the warm light inside was still inviting. Pushing the door open, he was greeted by the familiar chime of the bell. The bar looked almost the same as the night before, but something felt different. He scanned the room quickly, and sure enough, she was there. Sitting at the same spot, sipping a drink, her posture relaxed, yet perfectly composed. She didn't immediately notice him, and for a moment he studied her from across the room. It was strange, he could see the subtle movements of her muscles under her skin, the way her eyes flicked toward the other patrons without fully focusing on them, and the slight curve of her scales along her shoulders. She was beautiful, powerful, and otherworldly, yet she carried herself with a grace that seemed natural. He hesitated for a moment before walking over. This time, he didn't need the bartender to intervene. He simply pulled out the chair next to her and asked, "Mind if I sit?" She looked up, her golden eyes catching his in an instant. There was no surprise in her gaze, just a calm acknowledgement, as if she had expected him. "Sit," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I suppose you will be coming again." He chuckled nervously, sliding into the chair. "I guess I did. I didn't think I would, but here I am." She studied him for a moment, tilting her head slightly. "Curiosity can be dangerous," she said, but there was a hint of amusement in her tone. "I think some curiosity is harmless," he replied. "And sometimes it leads to interesting encounters." He paused, wondering if she would understand the weight of what he was saying. She nodded slowly, a faint smile playing at the corner of her lips. They sat in silence for a few moments, watching the room. The bar wasn't crowded, just a few regulars scattered around, but he felt as if they were in their own little world. Finally, she spoke again. "You are different from others. I can see it in the way you observe, in the way you speak. Humans often hide behind masks, but you are more honest than most." He felt a flush of warmth at her words, but also a strange discomfort. It wasn't often anyone noticed the small things about him. "I don't know if that's true," he said softly. I try to pay attention, I guess. Life is easier when you notice the details." She nodded thoughtfully. "Details are everything. They tell the truth that words often hide." She took a slow sip of her drink, her gaze never leaving his face. He wanted to ask her more about herself, about where she was from, what she really was, but the words caught in his throat. There was something about her presence that made him feel like even a simple question could be intrusive. Instead, he chose to share a small part of his life, the kind of ordinary story he rarely told anyone. "I grew up in this city," he said, leaning back slightly. "Nothing special. Just a small apartment, a job, and the usual routine. Some people might call it boring, but I like the predictability sometimes. It keeps me grounded." She listened intently, her golden eyes softening slightly. "Grounded? Yes, it is important to have something to return to, even for those who are. Not from here." He blinked, unsure what she meant, but didn't press. There was something about her, that suggested she didn't share everything. And perhaps he wasn't meant to know Dot. The conversation drifted naturally from there, moving between light humor and deeper reflections. He found himself laughing at her dry observations about human behavior, and she seemed to enjoy his reactions, tilting her head and letting out soft chuckles that were almost musical. It was easy, comfortable, and yet there was a tension underneath, an unspoken acknowledgement that she was unlike anyone he had ever met. Dot at one point. A couple of rowdy patrons entered the bar, their voices loud and disruptive. They didn't notice her at first, but as they moved closer, one of them made a crude remark, assuming she was just a costume performer or a fancy patron. He felt his stomach tighten, ready to defend her in some way, though he had no idea how. Dot, she didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice, but the air around her seemed to shift. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. She stood, tall and commanding, and spoke a single sentence. "You will leave, or you will regret it." The men froze, staring at her, and for a moment he feared something would happen. But she moved with such grace and control that they didn't know how to react. One by one, they muttered excuses and left, glancing back nervously. He watched, awestruck, as she returned to her seat. "Impressive," he said quietly, still catching his breath. She smiled faintly. "One does what is necessary to maintain peace. Strength is not only in force, but in restraint." He nodded, realizing how right she was. There was a quiet power about her, a command that didn't need to shout or strike. He had never seen anything like it before, and it made him feel both small and oddly safe at the same time. The rest of the evening passed in a similar rhythm. They talked, laughed, and shared stories. He noticed little things, the way she tilted her head when curious, the faint shimmer of her skin in the dim light, and the way her eyes seemed to see straight through him. It was strange, almost surreal, but he didn't want the night to end. Before leaving, he glanced at her one last time. "I don't know why I keep coming back," he said honestly. "Maybe I'm just curious. Maybe. I feel like there's something more to know." Her golden eyes met his, steady and knowing. "Curiosity can lead to understanding," she said softly. "Sometimes it also leads to connections you did not expect." He nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. Something told him she was speaking not just of curiosity, but of the bond forming between them, something that went beyond ordinary human interactions. Walking home that night, he felt a strange mix of emotions: excitement, awe, and a growing sense of wonder. He realized that this simple act, sitting with someone, talking, sharing a drink, had opened a door to something extraordinary. He didn't yet understand it fully, but he knew his life would not feel ordinary anymore. And somewhere, not too far from the city, she was watching too, observing, thinking, and perhaps even hoping for the same connection. There was a quiet acknowledgement between them, unspoken, that this meeting was just the beginning of something neither of them could have anticipated. The days that followed were strange. He found himself thinking about her constantly, replaying each glance, each word she had spoken. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced before, a quiet pull toward someone he barely knew, yet somehow felt connected to. He wondered what it was about her that made her so different from anyone else he had met. He couldn't explain it. Even when he was surrounded by people at work or walking through crowded streets, his mind kept drifting back to the bar and the dragon or the woman sitting there, sipping her drink, watching him with those golden eyes. He returned to the bar that evening, almost automatically, as if the city itself was guiding him. The familiar chime of the bell greeted him, and the warm light spilled out like an invitation. The bar was quieter than usual, only a few patrons scattered around, murmuring softly among themselves. And there she was, sitting in her usual spot. This time she seemed different. Her posture was relaxed, but her presence was stronger, more commanding, and he realized again how impossible it was to ignore her. He approached slowly, unsure what to say. "Hi," he managed, his voice catching slightly. She looked at him and tilted her head, as if expecting him. "You return," she said simply. Her voice was calm, yet carried the kind of weight that made him want to listen carefully to every word. He pulled out the chair next to her and sat down, trying to hide the nervous excitement that had crept into his chest. "Yeah," he said, "I wanted to see you again." She studied him for a moment, her golden eyes scanning his face as if searching for something hidden deep within him. "Curiosity," she said, almost as an observation rather than a question. "It brings you back. Often, humans do not realize the power of curiosity." He chuckled nervously. "I think I've realized it now." There was a pause, and then she leaned slightly closer, her eyes flicking toward him with subtle intensity. Sometimes curiosity reveals more than expected. Details you overlook, actions that seem ordinary, words spoken in passing, they can carry meaning beyond what you imagine. He found himself leaning in slightly, captivated by her words. "Like what?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Like the choice you made to speak to me. A simple gesture, a drink offered, a few words spoken, can change events in ways you cannot yet understand." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "I guess I just acted without thinking. Didn't expect anything to come of it." Her eyes seemed to shimmer for a moment, faintly catching the light in a way he hadn't noticed before. Even unplanned actions have consequences. Even small gestures can create connections that endure. He was about to respond when he noticed something strange. One of the regulars at the bar, a man who had been sitting quietly in the corner, suddenly froze and stared at her. His face went pale, and he whispered something to the bartender. The bartender shook his head and murmured under his breath, glancing at her with a mixture of fear and respect. "Who is he?" the human asked quietly, nodding toward the man. She glanced at him briefly, her expression unreadable. "He knows more than he should," she said. "But it matters little. Humans often see what they want, or what they fear, and ignore the truth." He frowned, unsure what she meant. The truth about what? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze back to him, her eyes calm but intense. "There are things you do not understand yet. Things about the world, about beings that exist beyond your perception. You will learn in time, if you are willing." He felt a shiver run down his spine. There was a weight in her words, a seriousness that made the back of his neck tingle. I think I want to understand," he admitted. A faint smile touched her lips. "Good. Curiosity and willingness are the first steps. Observation comes next. Learn to watch without judgment. Humans often fail at that." He nodded slowly, feeling the truth of her words in a way he could not explain. It was as if she had been speaking to the part of him that often went unnoticed, the quiet side that thought, observed, and wondered. As they continued to talk, subtle hints of her unusual nature became more apparent. She mentioned things that didn't quite fit with the world he knew, places he had never heard of, technologies that seemed impossible, and ideas that stretched beyond the limits of human understanding. Yet she spoke of them casually, as if they were ordinary, leaving him to piece together the strangeness on his own. "Do you always travel like this?" he asked, trying to make sense of one of her cryptic remarks. She tilted her head. "Travel is necessary. Observation requires movement. And sometimes one must walk among those who do not know, to see clearly what they cannot see otherwise." He frowned. "Walk among who?" "Among humans," she said simply. "To learn their ways, their habits, their choices? It is enlightening." He nodded slowly, realizing that she was observing him in ways he could barely comprehend. Every gesture he made, every word he spoke, seemed to be catalogued in her mind. It was both thrilling and terrifying. Their conversation drifted into lighter territory after that, as he shared stories from his childhood, the small victories and failures that had shaped him, the ordinary moments that felt extraordinary when told aloud. She listened, her eyes never leaving his, nodding at the right moments, asking questions that were subtle but meaningful. "You notice the little things," she said at one point, her voice calm. "The habits, the small choices, the reactions. Most humans overlook them, but you observe." He shrugged. "I guess I just pay attention. Life moves fast, and sometimes you miss the details if you don't look closely." Her gaze softened, a warmth creeping into her golden eyes. Details matter. They tell the story others cannot see. They reveal character, intention, and sometimes truth. He felt a sudden sense of connection, as if she understood him in a way no one else ever had. There was no judgment, no pretense, only quiet understanding and an unspoken bond forming between them. As the night wore on, the bar grew quieter. Most of the other patrons had left, leaving only a few scattered souls who seemed content to fade into the background. The world outside had changed. His senses were sharper, more alert. And he noticed things he had never seen before. The way the neon lights reflected off puddles on the street, the faint hum of traffic in the distance, the way shadows moved in subtle patterns. She noticed it too. "You see clearly," she said softly. "Even in darkness, there is observation. That is a rare gift." He smiled, feeling a strange sense of pride. "I've never thought of it that way." "There is much you have not yet seen," she replied. "Much to learn, much to understand. But that is the nature of existence. Observation is the beginning." He nodded, taking in her words. It was hard to explain why, but every word she spoke seemed to carry weight beyond what was said. He felt like he was learning, not just about her, but about himself, about the way the world worked, and about the small choices that could ripple outward in ways he could not predict. At some point, the conversation lulled, and they sat in companionable silence, sipping their drinks and watching the dimly lit bar. He realized that despite the strangeness of the night, the hints of something extraordinary in her presence, he felt safe. She was powerful, beyond anything he could imagine, yet there was a calmness in her aura, a quiet reassurance that made him feel grounded. Before leaving, he glanced at her one last time. "I don't know what this is," he admitted quietly, "or why I feel drawn to you, but I want to know more." Her golden eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "Curiosity is a bridge," she said softly. "It can lead to understanding, to connection, to things you cannot yet imagine. Keep walking, keep observing, and you will see." He nodded slowly, feeling a sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement mixed with awe. Something had shifted between them, something subtle but undeniable. He didn't yet know what it was, but he knew his life would never be the same. Walking home that night, he felt a strange mix of wonder, curiosity, and anticipation. The world seemed sharper, fuller, and more alive. Every sound, every movement, every shadow seemed to carry meaning. And somewhere, not far away, she was observing too, thinking, calculating, and perhaps even hoping for the same connection he now felt. That evening, the city felt different. The air was heavier, almost electric, as if it knew something unusual was about to happen. He walked toward the bar with a mix of anticipation and unease. His steps echoed lightly against the pavement, and he found himself checking over his shoulder, half expecting the ordinary night to break into something extraordinary. He had come here enough times to feel familiar with the streets. But tonight, every sound, the distant siren, the rustle of leaves in the wind, The faint hum of traffic seemed sharper. More immediate. When he pushed open the door, the familiar chime sounded. The bar was quiet, nearly empty, except for a few regulars sitting at the counter and a couple of patrons near the jukebox. And there she was, sitting at her usual spot, her golden eyes fixed on him before he even reached her. He paused, feeling that familiar mix of curiosity and awe. The subtle shimmer of her scales caught the dim light, making her seem almost unreal. "You're late," she said, though there was no accusation in her voice. Only observation. He smiled nervously, sliding into the chair beside her. "I got caught up at work, but I couldn't miss tonight." She tilted her head, studying him. "Curiosity brings you here," she said. "It is not only timing that matters." He laughed softly. "You make it sound more serious than it is." "Seriousness is often hidden in simplicity," she replied. Her voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made him pay closer attention. A single action, a choice, a gesture, these define the outcome of what follows. He nodded, unsure how to respond. Her words always seemed deeper than they appeared. There was always something more behind them. A hidden meaning he could feel, but not yet understand. As they talked, the conversation flowed naturally. But he couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would be different. He noticed the way the bar seemed to quiet further around them, as if the room itself was holding its breath. He looked at her and realized that she was more than just remarkable. She radiated a presence that altered the space around her. People near her gave subtle nods, whispers, or uneasy glances. She moved through the room like she owned it, yet she didn't raise her voice or demand attention. The quiet strength she carried was undeniable. He remembered a moment from the previous night, when a few rowdy patrons had tried to provoke her. He had watched, awestruck, as she commanded the situation without raising her hands, without threatening anyone. He had thought it was luck, or perhaps the effect of her size and strength. But tonight, he realized it was more than that. It was control, intelligence, and power. Something far beyond what humans could comprehend. A man at the bar, clearly drunk and frustrated, slammed his fist against the counter, cursing loudly. The bartender raised an eyebrow, and the man turned toward her, assuming she would be an easy target for his anger. The human tensed, ready to intervene, but before he could react, she simply lifted her hand slightly. There was no sound, no dramatic gesture, just a subtle movement. The man froze, his eyes widening, and then his body stiffened as if caught in an invisible force. He stumbled backward, muttering incoherently, and slumped into a chair, unable to rise. The human blinked, shocked, unsure if he had imagined it. She turned to him, calm and unhurried. "Do not fear," she said softly. "I only adjust what is necessary to maintain order. Strength is not always about aggression. Sometimes it is subtle, precise, and unseen." He swallowed hard, trying to process what had just happened. I don't understand," he said. "You will," she replied, her eyes steady and unwavering. "You are learning. Observation and patience reveal the truth." His heart raced as he realized he was dealing with someone or something far beyond anything he had ever encountered. There was a calmness to her, a control, and a power that seemed limitless, yet she used it with care, restraint, and wisdom. It was both terrifying and fascinating. The rest of the night passed with a strange intensity. He tried to keep the conversation casual, talking about work, the city, and the mundane details of life. She listened with focus, asking questions that seemed ordinary, but always carried deeper implications. He found himself analyzing his own words, realizing that she wasn't just listening, she was understanding, interpreting, noticing details he hadn't even considered. "You see the world differently than most humans," she said at one point. "It is not only your attention to detail, but your willingness to engage, to understand. Humans often ignore what is not immediate or obvious. He smiled, feeling both proud and overwhelmed. I guess I just try to notice things. Life moves fast, and if you don't pay attention, you miss it all. Her golden eyes shimmered faintly. Yes, and now you notice more than before. Your senses, your awareness, they are growing. That is good. It is necessary. He frowned slightly, curious. Necessary for what? For understanding, she said simply. For connection. For choices that will matter later. The way she spoke made his mind race. He had a sense that there was more going on than he could see, that her world was vast, complex, and beyond human comprehension. Yet he didn't feel afraid. He felt a strange excitement, a pull toward something larger, something extraordinary. At one point, a commotion arose near the door. A man tried to rush past the entrance, clearly drunk and belligerent. The human tensed, ready to intervene, but she was already standing, her form tall, imposing, and graceful. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and the air around her seemed to shift. Heavier and charged. The man froze. His movements halted mid-step. He stumbled, tried to speak, but no sound came. The bartender stepped back, watching silently. The human realized she was doing something controlling the situation, but in a way that was invisible, almost impossible to detect. She turned her head slightly toward him, as if to reassure him. "Do not fear," she said softly. "I will handle this." Within moments, the man had left, muttering under his breath, looking shaken and unnerved. The human exhaled slowly, his pulse still racing. He could hardly believe what he had witnessed. She returned to her seat, calm and composed, sipping her drink as if nothing had happened. "Strength without control is chaos," she said quietly. "Control without understanding is danger. True power is balance." He nodded, still trying to process everything. "I don't know how you do it," he said honestly. "It is not done lightly," she replied. "Every action has consequences. Awareness is essential. Observation, patience, and restraint create harmony." He felt a growing respect for her, not just for her abilities, but for the way she carried herself. There was wisdom in her calmness, intelligence in her actions, and a deep understanding of the world that he could barely grasp. As the night wore on, their conversation shifted again, moving into quieter reflections. He spoke of his dreams, his fears, the small regrets that weighed on him, and the fleeting joys he often overlooked. She listened, asking questions that made him think deeply, that forced him to confront thoughts he usually ignored. "You have potential," she said softly. "Potential to see, to understand, to act in ways that others cannot. Humans waste it, distracted by trivialities. But you notice, you reflect, you care. That is rare." He felt warmth rise in his chest, a mixture of pride and humility. "I don't feel that special," he said quietly. "Special is not about ego," she replied. "It is about awareness, choice, and action. You are learning. That is what matters." When he finally left the bar that night, the streets seemed alive in a new way. The air was crisp, the distant city lights glowing with a strange clarity. Every sound, every shadow, every movement felt significant. He realized that he had been changed by the evening, by her presence, by the lessons hidden in her words and actions. And somewhere nearby, she watched too, observing, calculating, and perhaps feeling the beginnings of trust and connection. There was a silent understanding between them, unspoken, yet undeniable. Something extraordinary was forming, something beyond explanation. The human walked home slowly, feeling the weight of the night's events. He knew he was learning, growing, and seeing the world differently. And he knew that this encounter, this strange, impossible being, had opened a door to something far beyond the ordinary. The city felt quieter that night, though the streets were alive with the usual hum of distant traffic and occasional footsteps echoing off the buildings. He walked toward the bar, his mind buzzing with thoughts from the previous encounters. Something about her had changed the way he saw the world. Ordinary moments now seemed layered with meaning. Small gestures now felt important, and the world itself seemed sharper, more alive. He pushed open the bar door and was greeted by the familiar chime. The warm light spilled into the night, and a low murmur of conversation welcomed him. There she was, sitting at her usual spot, calm and composed. The faint shimmer of her scales caught the light again, and her golden eyes were fixed on him as if she had been expecting him. "Good evening," she said, her voice soft, yet carrying that subtle authority that made him lean in closer. "Evening," he replied, sliding into the chair beside her. He noticed the way her presence seemed to shift the room. The conversations of the other patrons softened. The atmosphere felt lighter, yet somehow charged. He wondered again at the power she held, the quiet but undeniable influence she seemed to have on everything around her. "You have returned," she observed. "Curiosity continues to guide you." He smiled faintly. "I suppose it does. I want to understand. I want to know why you're here, what all this really means." Her golden eyes held his for a moment, steady and unwavering. "Very well," she said softly. "Perhaps it is time to reveal some of the truth." His heart skipped a beat. Truth? He had sensed there was more to her than met the eye, but he had not expected this. He leaned in, careful not to sound too eager, though curiosity and anticipation had made his voice almost unsteady. "I am not like others," she began. Her voice was calm, measured, and deliberate. "I am not of this world. I am a queen far from here, visiting to learn, to observe, and to understand your kind." He blinked, unable to process the words at first. "Ah, queen? From somewhere else?" "Yes," she said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I have come among humans in disguise, to see, to learn, and to experience without interference. Many would not understand. Most would fear. But you?" She paused, her eyes flicking to his. "You are different. You observe, you think, you care." He could hardly breathe. His mind raced, trying to reconcile what he was hearing with what he had seen. The strength, the control, the subtle power she had displayed, they weren't luck, they weren't coincidence. They were real, and he was in the presence of someone extraordinary, someone beyond human understanding. "You? You're an alien?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Yes," she replied, "from a place far beyond this planet. I have chosen this form to blend, to move among humans without causing panic or alarm. Most cannot accept what they do not see. You can, because you look beyond appearances. You notice what others ignore." He shook his head slowly, still trying to comprehend it all. I don't know what to say. It's unbelievable." She smiled faintly, a small curve of her lips that carried both amusement and reassurance. "Belief is not necessary. Understanding comes from observation, from experience. You have already taken the first steps by returning, by speaking, by listening." He nodded, still in awe. He had imagined many things in his life, but never anything like this. An alien queen sitting beside him in a bar, speaking to him as if he were an equal. The thought was overwhelming, yet oddly comforting. "You're human?" she asked, almost rhetorically, as if confirming something she already knew. "Yes," he said. I don't know why I'm here, why this keeps happening, but I feel drawn to you, I guess. Something about you." She studied him carefully, her golden eyes reflecting the dim bar lights. "That is natural. Humans are drawn to the extraordinary, to what challenges understanding. You are open, curious, and willing. That makes you special. He felt warmth rise in his chest, a mixture of pride, fear, and wonder. Special isn't usually how I describe myself, he admitted. Special is not about ego or fame, she said softly. It is about perception, awareness, and the ability to act when needed. You have shown patience, attentiveness, and thoughtfulness. That is rare. He realized she was speaking not just about the surface level, but about the core of who he was. It made him uncomfortable in a way that was humbling, yet also inspiring. For the first time, he felt truly seen. They continued to talk slowly, deliberately. She spoke of her world, of civilizations that spanned galaxies, of choices and responsibilities far beyond human comprehension. She spoke of the wisdom and power required to lead, to maintain balance, and to protect life in ways that humans could barely imagine. He listened, fascinated, absorbing every word. The world he had known, simple and predictable, now seemed tiny, narrow, and full of limits. And yet, in the midst of that vastness, he felt a connection to her, a bridge between the ordinary human world and the extraordinary universe she represented. Why me? He asked at one point, unable to contain his curiosity. Why choose to speak with me? There must be billions of humans. She looked at him steadily. You notice. You care. You return despite fear or uncertainty. You see beyond the ordinary. Most humans would flee, would mock, would refuse to engage. You choose differently. He felt a lump in his throat. The thought that he had been noticed, not for power, wealth, or status, but for his small acts of observation and thoughtfulness, touched him deeply. You're real, he whispered. I mean, all of this is real. You're really here. You're really an alien queen. She smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and serenity. Yes, I am real. And you are part of this moment because you are willing to act with curiosity and kindness. Small actions, as I said, can have large effects. He nodded slowly, still trying to process the enormity of the situation. I never expected any of this. I bought you a drink. That gesture spoke more than you realize, she said. Kindness, curiosity, and courage, these are qualities that endure, even in worlds far beyond this one. The human leaned back, staring at her. He was exhausted from the intensity of the revelation, yet invigorated in a way he could not describe. Every word, every gesture, every subtle motion she made seemed to carry meaning, as if he were witnessing a part of the universe he had never glimpsed before. You've changed the way I see things, he said quietly. Even before I knew who you really are, I felt something different. Seeing the world, noticing details, caring about small things, it feels bigger now somehow. She tilted her head, her golden eyes softening. That is the effect of awareness. Observation shapes understanding, and understanding fosters connection. You are beginning to see the larger patterns, the invisible threads that bind life together. He nodded, feeling both overwhelmed and inspired. The ordinary world he had lived in suddenly felt richer, layered with meaning and possibilities. And in the midst of it all, she was the focal point, the spark that had opened his eyes to what he had been missing. Before leaving, she spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. The world you know is small. There are vast experiences and truths beyond your comprehension. You have a choice to remain in the ordinary or to step into the extraordinary. He felt a shiver run through him. The choice was clear, even if terrifying. I want to understand, he said. I want to learn, to see, to be part of this somehow. She smiled, a faint curve of her lips that carried both approval and reassurance. Then you will, The path is not simple, nor without challenge, but you have begun. That is what matters. Walking home that night, the streets seemed transformed. The ordinary city lights, the hum of distant cars, even the shadows cast by buildings, all of it felt layered with possibility, as if the world had expanded overnight. He realized that his life, once simple and predictable, had shifted irrevocably. A door had opened to something extraordinary, something beyond human imagination, and somewhere not far away she watched, observing, thinking, and quietly approving his first steps into a wider, more complex reality. The unspoken connection between them was undeniable, a fragile thread stretching across worlds, waiting to grow stronger. He knew, deep down, that his life would never be the same. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and it had started with something as simple as buying a drink. The next few days were different for him. The city, which once felt ordinary and predictable, now seemed full of hidden possibilities. Every sound, every movement, every flicker of light drew his attention in ways he hadn't noticed before. The memory of her golden eyes, the shimmer of her scales, and her calm, commanding presence haunted him in the best possible way. He realized that meeting her had changed him, not just emotionally, but in the way he perceived the world. He found himself walking toward the bar again that evening, anticipation buzzing through him with every step. He wasn't sure why or what he expected, but he knew he had to go. Each time he returned, it felt like stepping into a different world, one that existed alongside the ordinary human life he had always known. Pushing the door open, he was greeted by the familiar chime and warm light spilling into the night. The bar was quiet, only a few patrons scattered around, and there she was, sitting in her usual spot. The faint glow of her golden eyes caught the dim light, and he noticed something new, a subtle aura of calm authority, almost regal, radiating from her as if the room itself bent slightly toward her presence. "Good evening," she said softly, her voice gentle but commanding. "Evening," he replied, sliding into the chair beside her. He felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness, as if each moment with her held potential he could not yet understand. "You have returned," she observed. "Curiosity continues to guide you, as it should." He smiled faintly, feeling warmth in her attention. "I couldn't stay away. I want to understand everything about this, about you." She looked at him steadily, her golden eyes holding his gaze with a quiet intensity. Understanding comes in steps. One must observe, listen, and reflect. Knowledge is not gained instantly, but through patience and experience. "You have already begun the journey." The words made his heart race. He realized again that this wasn't just a casual meeting or a fleeting encounter. Something larger was at play, something beyond human comprehension, and yet he felt drawn in completely. They spoke for hours, as they had before, but the conversation felt deeper now. She shared glimpses of her world-vast galaxies, civilizations beyond imagination, and the responsibilities that came with her position. He listened, fascinated, absorbing every detail. And though the stories were extraordinary, she spoke of them with such calmness and simplicity that it made the impossible feel almost normal. "You are listening carefully," she noted at one point. "Most humans cannot process what I say or dismiss it as fantasy. You absorb and consider. That is rare." He smiled, feeling a mix of pride and awe. "I want to understand. I want to learn. Everything you share, I want to remember." Her golden eyes softened slightly. "Then you will. Understanding is not only about hearing words, but about noticing truths between them. Observation and reflection are keys to knowledge." As the evening wore on, she revealed more about herself, though still carefully. She spoke of her people, their customs, their technologies, and their responsibilities. He realized that everything he had assumed about strength and power was incomplete. She was not just physically or mentally powerful. She carried the weight of her civilization, the responsibility of decisions that affected countless lives. And yet, in her presence, he felt safe, calm, and inspired. At one point, he noticed her looking around the bar with subtle attention, her golden eyes tracking small details he had never noticed. "What are you doing?" he asked, curious. "Observing," she replied simply. "Even here, among humans, patterns exist. Choices, movements, reactions, all carry meaning. Awareness allows control, and control maintains harmony." He nodded slowly, understanding that her abilities were not about intimidation or fear, but about perception, restraint, and precision. She had the power to act decisively, yet she chose careful observation first. It was a kind of wisdom he had never encountered before. After a moment, she turned her gaze back to him. "You have questions," she said softly. "I can see it. Ask them." He hesitated, unsure where to begin. There were so many things he wanted to know about her world, her powers, and the life she led beyond the human realm. Finally, he asked, "Why me? Why did you let me see all of this?" Her golden eyes studied him for a long moment. "Because you are different. You notice. You care. You return despite uncertainty. Most humans would ignore, flee, or mock. You choose to engage. That is rare. That is why you are here." He felt a lump in his throat. He had never imagined that his ordinary curiosity and small acts of kindness could matter to someone so extraordinary. I don't know what to say," he admitted quietly. "Do not say anything," she replied softly. "Actions and choices speak louder than words. You have already shown courage, patience, and thoughtfulness. That is enough." The human felt a wave of admiration and respect for her. She was not only powerful, but wise, kind, and discerning. The way she carried herself, the way she observed the world, and the way she judged not by appearances, but by actions, it all left him in awe. They continued to talk, sharing small stories, reflecting on life, and observing the subtle details around them. He noticed the way her gaze could catch a movement in the corner of the room, how she could read a person's intention from a glance, and how she remained calm even when others acted irrationally. Her presence was extraordinary, and yet she made it feel natural, like he was seeing a side of life most people would never notice. As the night grew late, he realized he had spent hours beside her, yet he didn't want the evening to end. There was a quiet bond forming between them, unspoken but undeniable. He felt connected to her in a way he had never felt with anyone else, a sense of trust and understanding that transcended words. "You have changed," she said finally, her voice soft but deliberate. "Since our first meeting, you see more, you notice more, and you understand more. That is a beginning, not an end." He nodded slowly, understanding the truth of her words. "I feel different. The world feels bigger, more alive, and I feel like I'm only just beginning to see it." "That is the nature of growth," she replied. "Curiosity leads to understanding. Understanding leads to connection. Connection leads to choices that matter. You are learning, and that is the first step to something greater." He felt a thrill of anticipation. He knew that his life had already changed, but he sensed that the most extraordinary moments were still ahead. Something about her, about their connection, suggested that this was only the beginning of an incredible journey. When he finally stood to leave, she looked at him steadily. "The path before you is not simple. There will be challenges, discoveries, and moments that test your courage. But you are ready because you have shown awareness, patience, and integrity. That is rare among humans." He felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I want to continue. I want to see, to learn, and to be part of this somehow." Her golden eyes softened into a faint smile. "Then you will. The door has opened. What comes next depends on your choices, your curiosity, and your courage." Walking home that night, the streets seemed alive in a way he had never noticed before. The ordinary world around him had transformed, imbued with meaning, possibility, and wonder. Each sound, each movement, each shadow felt layered with significance, as if the universe itself had expanded to reveal hidden truths. He realized that his life had been forever altered by a single, ordinary act: buying a drink for someone he didn't fully understand. That small gesture had opened a door to a world beyond imagination, a world of extraordinary beings, hidden patterns, and infinite possibilities. And somewhere nearby, she watched, observing, thinking, and quietly approving the choices he had made. The bond between them, fragile but growing, stretched across worlds. It was unspoken, yet undeniable, a connection that promised adventures, discoveries, and experiences far beyond anything he had ever known. For the first time in his life, he felt truly alive. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and it had started with something as simple as an act of kindness. He knew one thing with certainty: his life would never be the same again. And with her watching, guiding, and sharing her world, he was ready to step fully into the unknown, ready to discover the wonders beyond the ordinary, and ready to embrace the extraordinary journey that awaited him.